Imagine going to the park. There is a sign that says no ball games allowed. Does it mean that you can't use the basketball court in the park to play basketball? Is it not allowed to sit by the pond and play with a stress ball or a football video game on a mobile phone? And if there hadn't been any sign at all, would it be okay to play football in the flower beds? Legal rules cannot lay down each and every conceivable scenario covered by them. Interpretation is a necessary process to pin down the meaning of any legal rule. But how is this to be done? There are rules of interpretation that clarify the content of rules in a way that is foreseeable for everybody. In international law, rules of interpretation have been clearly laid down with respect to treaties. These rules aim to provide concrete guidance for the interpretation of international treaties. We look, for instance, to the terms of a provision, its context, its object and purpose, but also its social and political surroundings and legislative history. Things get a bit more tricky when it comes to customary international law. Customary rules emerge from practices adopted by states over time because they consider themselves legally bound to do so. Even though they are unwritten, they can bind all states. In fact, some of the most important rules of international law are grounded in customary international law: the protection of basic human rights and the environment, the prohibition of use of force, the freedom of the high seas, and even space law. Like all rules, customary rules are abstract to some extent. They thus necessarily require some element of interpretation. 3 examples. 1. The prohibition of piracy. Is it just about the looting of ships on the high seas? Or is it also about acts of violence committed for political or even ideological purposes? 2. Armed conflict. Civilians and civilian infrastructure must be protected, but are these rules applicable only in boots-on-the-ground operations? Or are they also applicable in cyber operations? 3. People and acts that are covered by immunities. How does one know precisely which person, which act, or which object is covered by what level of immunity or inviolability? The current lack of a clear framework for interpretation of customary rules leads to uncertainty. Like in treaty interpretation, rules of interpretation could provide the blueprint to resolve questions about the meaning of customary rules. They could do so in a predictable and fair manner and address current criticisms surrounding problems, pitfalls, and even the unfairness of the process through which customary law has at points emerged. The TRICI Law Project engages with this tricky topic. It seeks to demonstrate how customary rules are interpreted and how we can refine the language and debates surrounding their interpretation, and perhaps even develop those interpretative rules further.